peppers, spices, even a hazelnut spread. That's because the cabinet, it's out here in the yard too. And just behind me, the house burnt and flattened. It's not just trees that are down. This utility pole cracked at its base here, supporting a lot of wiring up top. Just the size of it and the fact that it broke here at the base. Take a look at this thing. It's stretching higher than I can even reach right here without getting on my tippy toes. As for how the balance of power stands right now, let's take a look at the House of Representatives. There's 63 Republican seats right now. The Democrats would need to flip 4 of those in order to break the supermajority. There is still a firefight going on right now. It's still very intense, and there's a lot of people out here watching this. The first update I have is a very, very visual one. If you take a look here behind me, you'll see the smoke here is starting to dissipate a little bit. In the past half an hour or so, we've seen a couple of things happen. First and foremost, we've been watching a police prisoner transport vehicle over there in the corner. The police have moved it to an area where we can't see it too well, but we believe it's close to a door. Actually, if you take a look right now, it looks like that officer was holding what appeared to be was chaining those folks together earlier. And Wave 3 News reporter Caitlin Rust has been following this story all morning as well. Caitlin's at another part of the city where protesters are at as well. Caitlin, what's going on where you're at? Volunteers say they were concerned about the drought conditions to start with, but then they actually saw the trees, and this is what they saw. A lot of brown leaves throughout them, but there are still some like this with just a little bit of green, a little bit of life in them, but they're afraid they could die within just days now. She says she has advice, and it involves a lot of this. The skies are still gray out here. Of course, that means there's mud here in the infield. But people are ready, they're prepared, they've got tarps, and of course, they've got their rain jackets. The seats here are just one of the changes that you'll notice. You also have a different experience if you're going to the infield, and if you're sitting a little bit higher up. Family members say that as what happened here begins to settle in, they're beginning to have questions. The sun has now come up, and the damage is clear.
Just as that train went by, kaboom!
The small town of Millwood still shaken a day after the home of Angela Young and her 7-year-old daughter Joanna exploded.
Blowed up or something.
Pieces of their life now scattered through the yard. See here, the door is blown off, and about 10 feet away, the house burnt and flattened. Young's son says his sister has burns on her back, arms, and parts of her body, but may be released soon. Good news to family, friends remembering better days.
A little girl, she come over every day in the summertime and get a popsicle. I give her a popsicle, and she come get every evening. She come get one.
The 7-year-old walking away with lesser injuries because the family says they believe her mother shielded her. Traveling between Norton Children's and U of L Hospital, they say Young will now be sedated for weeks to avoid the pain of 2nd and 3rd degree burns all over her body.
It's a very odd bunch of emotions. Growing up on a farm, you learn to be tough, so it's not much sadness, and more like a mix of anger and unknowing.
Anger because Scanlon says the home gas tank was filled by Midway propane just hours before the explosion. And he says even the gas serviceman noted smelling gas on the property.
My biggest question I have, besides the well-being of my family members, is if the job of the propane company was done properly.
We called Midway Propane to ask. They declined to comment. The state fire marshal still investigating the cause. One neighbor says he's not worried about his tank, but says he doesn't know if there's a way to shut it off in case of emergency. Scanlon says he's relieved his family members are still alive and is trying to make the best of the tragic situation.
It doesn't mean that you can't learn nothing from it, and that doesn't mean that life's going to be all that bad.
He's hoping for a full recovery for his mom, but still unsure if it will happen. Scanlon says that his mother will be in the hospital for 3 to 4 more months. In Millwood, Mike Fussell, Wave 3 News. It's Saturday night. A voice over the intercom is about to send a jolt of adrenaline through the building. Doctors, nurses, and technicians spring into action, preparing for what may become a display of just how fragile life can be.
Time is so important.
Minutes later, sirens are getting louder, and a growing light in the sky reveals a helicopter is soon arriving. In just the first few hours of this night, gashes, a broken leg from a motorcycle wreck, and a person found unresponsive.
Hey, open your eyes.
The most critical will follow this path into room 9. The staff here, no strangers to pain, and they've all seen blood. So they know, just as calm sets in, it can all happen again.
PBS room 9, bay 1, PBS room 9, bay 1, please.
This time with even more urgency.
We are 9 minutes out.
A man shot in both legs is on the way.
GSW, both sides. Entrance room to the right medial side, entrance room to the left outer side.
Everyone's a little more on edge. I mean, you know that this patient could crash.
As he arrives, so does a new intensity. Technicians look for shrapnel. Blood is pumped back into his body, and x-rays show bullets have broken his bones.
And raising children and reflecting, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is some stressful stuff. Like what we see, what we are a part of.
While the dire situation plays out, community health workers ensure those close to victims don't take their anger to the streets.
Retaliation is real. The family members are mad. They are saying, we lost our young man whom we were expecting to be taking care of us in the future.
Community health worker Jeffrey Nadama says he draws from his past to confront it all.
I started working with genocide survivors in Rwanda when I was like 20-something.
Half a world away, he's using the same skills in Louisville to help those close to death. This gunshot victim would survive, though. Another one who showed up without warning would too. But the issue has been unrelenting. U of L Hospital says it's admitted 268 gunshot patients during the first 3 quarters of the year. Over the past 10 years, the trend is upward. If shootings continue at the current rate, this year could be the bloodiest of the decade.
Going out and telling the mother of an 18-year-old that he died from a gunshot, I don't know a good way to do that.
So the university is collecting data, studying how to treat gunshot victims, teaching students about trauma earlier. In the past 2 years, they've also hired more community health workers.
We cry with them. We laugh with them. They are part of our families.
Natama says that can be tough, but he also gets to celebrate the good in people's lives. The whole trauma team is doing just that with Sierra Twyman 5 years after a shooting could have left her dead.
I remember laying on the porch with my baby in my hands.
Twyman survived, but her 16-month-old daughter, Naraya, did not.
She loved everybody. I want kids to be able to, run around like kids should be able to do.
On this day, she's thanking staff for her 2 children who've come into the world never knowing their sister. To Twyman, it's a second chance at motherhood.
I was looking for this moment to thank all of y'all. The ones I remember that came to my bedside.
Thanks, she says, for those around her who love what they do.
I feel like I'm filling my gaps. So serving is part of my calling.
A calling that can be bittersweet. Because if the trend continues, another gunshot victim will be on the way soon. Another life possibly in the balance. Trauma workers experiencing what onlookers might say is traumatic itself.
We understand their pain because we are survivors too.
Survivors that when called upon will be ready in room 9.
Room 9.
You just saw how busy it was on the night that I visited U of L Hospital. On that same night, fake social media reports came out from the Kentucky State Fair that there was a mass shooting. Now, those here at the hospital say they've never dealt with a situation like that, but they're prepared for it if it comes to that. In Louisville, Mike Fussell, Wave 3 News. Divided by Magazine Street, protesters met face-to-face, barricades up, police on roofs, watching it all unfold. Occupy ICE demonstrators who want that federal agency to be abolished have been camped outside of its local building on 7th Street since Monday.
They are a police force that answers directly to the president, and they go after whoever the president says.
And continue to protest federal immigration policies Saturday.
We've been here since Monday at 6 in the morning. well, single violent incident.
Louisville Metro Police hoped that peace would continue as members of a group called the 3 Percenters arrived.
ICE doesn't have to go anywhere. You want the families to be together? Deport them all.
The militia organization held a counter-protest in support of federal immigration policies.
ICE and Customs, they're doing nothing more than trying to secure our borders, stop the flood of drugs, of gang members.
At the peak of the protest, the two sides, which both brought guns, chanted back and forth across the barricades.
America first!
Police got involved a couple of times here when members of the group, the Honorable Sacred Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, showed up but were yelled at by 3 Percenter protesters.
We don't want you here. No. We support freedom of speech. No. We support freedom. No. Man, get out of here. Man, we don't want you.
Yeah, we support ICE. We're here for the same reason.
We're not here to hate. We are here to preserve American ways.
A man also escorted out of the Occupy ICE side of the protest after a confrontation between people there.
Gotcha, buddy.
Despite these incidents, the primary weapons of the day were words. Sometimes on signs, sometimes shouted. But a meeting, approached with caution by police, turned out to be peaceful after all. Smoke in their eyes, fire at their backs. Louisville firefighters and anyone nearby dropping everything to help.
We serve people all day, so this is...
Holly Conway works at the restaurant K-Roos. Next door, her sleeves rolled up. She was among those giving firefighters a hand with water, cold towels, and this. Random people taking action, forming a straight line, passing bikes out of a burning business one by one.
Help has been absolutely moving. So I've never seen anything like it before.
The fire burned out of control for more than 2 hours.
They had fire that was in I believe in an electrical closet that had already progressed up into the attic of the building.
3 businesses up in flames, including Scheller's bike shop.
You know, there's been other ups and downs we've had over the years, and now I guess I can say we've seen it all.
And the now destroyed Simply Mac, where those who saw it happen say the fire started after an electrical switch was flipped and employees ran to Domino's to get a fire extinguisher.
It's just so strong that it was just burning my face and nose.
Ethan Beverly tried to help out too.
I'm the assistant manager at 130 Breckenridge Domino's, or was.
But in the end, after the smoke moved out, the damage was clear.
Honestly, me and my general manager, we put a lot of work into this place recently. We've made it one of the best Domino's in the city. It's honestly really disappointing to see it go down like this.
A disappointment, but Beverly says it's just that, nothing more, because he and all others walked away without seriously getting hurt.
Now, through Project H&B ID, they want you to let them know if you see anybody you know in them. Wave 3 News reporter Mike Fussell stopped by today to take a look.
Yeah, unfortunately, I didn't see anyone
really?
I knew.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for helping out.
Yeah, I thought I'd give it a shot.
Okay.
But those at the museum say that it's been exciting. People have actually been coming in, and they've been identifying people in the pictures they put up.
The questions have come from those folks in the community, as well as Deborah and I have formulated some. So we're going to take that question, maybe go a little bit even more narrow at this point. What plan do you have to help District 8 businesses survive the COVID-19 pandemic? And what is your plan post-COVID for the Bardstown Road business corridor? And Mr. Borsch, we'll start with you this time.
Mike Fussell, he never takes a night off. He covered a team that figures to get road weary this season, Mike.
That's right about the road weary part, not so much about the never taking a night off part. Ballard Stadium is not safe. They have to tear down the cement bleachers, so they'll be the Road Warriors in 2019, and it all started tonight.
This is Ballard and Dobbs on Touchdown Friday night. Let's go, Dragons!
All right, Ballard gets right to it right here. First quarter, handoff to Jaden Farmer. He's going to trade that stiff arm right there for his shoe. Look at that. Maybe he's a little faster without it because he runs right into the end zone, bootless, Bruins get the lead 6-0. They have something to celebrate early. Now, a couple minutes later, things get a little funky. It is the first game of the season, so we get a little fumble here, a little chaos, but Bruin Braden Gates, he's going to eventually scoop it up. But on the very next play, karma still is all out of whack here. What comes around goes around. In this case, is going to come back around. Doss's Dalian Young with the interception right there, but he loses it again. Fumble. The final here, though, Ballard wins it big, 50-8 to start off their never-ending road trip. Let me show you first how we're tracking these results. This is the Kentucky Secretary of State website here. As you can see, a lot of different districts we can look at here. You can open and close these, show you the percentages here, as well as a map can kind of illustrate what's going on throughout the night. As for how the balance of power stands right now, let's take a look at the House of Representatives. There's 63 Republican seats right now. The Democrats would need to flip 4 of those in order to break the supermajority. Back from the College World Series a little earlier than the team might have hoped, but the Cards are already getting ready for their title shot. The next one to come, head coach Dan McDonnell says there's no off time in baseball, or at least there's very little of it. When you're trying to gain trust, some people will point back to the last session, the sewer bill and the way that was passed, sure, as well as even voting out some of the rules this
and I had a
session.
problem last year with how the pension bill came out last year. I was a no vote.
We've been looking at this all night, keeping tally. In terms of flips, things have been even so far. We've seen 3 on the Republican side of things, as well as 3 games for the Democrats. So things look like they're holding pretty steady in terms of the supermajority. The Senate is also being held by the Republicans. That was found out pretty early, no surprise there. But let's take a look at some of those notable flips. Team USA wins it 2-1. They move on to play France in the quarterfinals, and that will be on Friday.
Yeah, that was a tough game for them.
It's a tough game, but it's not going to get any easier with France.
Yeah, so they say France does have one more day to kind of recover.
Yeah,
so.
Plus they're at home, so
yeah, that's
helps.
true.
A big blue caravan rolled out across the Commonwealth this afternoon. Coaches from the Kentucky men's and women's soccer teams, gymnastics, and women's basketball team took a trip to Hazard.